For decades, the freak show was one of America's most famous forms of entertainment. Today, the same shows would be considered unethical and dehumanizing. But in the mid-19th century, Americans were beginning to move away from farms and a family-based society to one that depended more on institutions, including organized entertainment. It was during this period that Barnum elevated the freak show to national fame through the American Museum in New York City. And in today's video, we'll look at the 15 real-life circus freaks that actually existed. Let's begin this journey with number 15, the living skeleton. No one had ever seen a body like Claude Ambroise Seurat's. By his mid-teens, his once healthy frame had wasted skin and bone. Doctors measured his arm at barely 4 inches around and his waist at under 24. Standing about 5 feet and 7, he weighed just 78 pounds, earning the name the living skeleton. Medical circles couldn't get enough of him. Scientists and artists alike studied his frail figure as he toured Europe through the 1820s. Crowds in London and Paris lined up to witness the man who looked carved out of bone. The painter Francisco Goya even made a sketch after seeing him perform in Bordeaux. By 1832, his body had shrunk further to 5 feet 3 and 43 French pounds. His final exhibition was in Brittany a year later. Then, silence. Later reports claimed a tapeworm had starved him from within. His exact death remains unknown, but his silhouette still haunts anatomy books, and Goya's art keeps him alive. Number 14, the Yorkshire Giant. In the late 1700s, Market Wayton had a man who simply didn't stop growing. William Bradley, later known as the Yorkshire Giant, reached an astounding 7 feet 9 inches and weighed over 14 pounds the day he arrived on Earth. At school, his height made him both a curiosity and a punishment tool. Teachers had him lift unruly students onto the rafters until they calmed down. For a while, he worked near Pocklington for barely 10 shillings a week, but his size soon turned into his livelihood. Traveling with showmen and the famed Yorkshire Pig, he became one of Britain's most famous attractions. Eventually, he took charge of his own exhibitions, charging a shilling per visitor and even earning a golden watch from King George III. When he passed at just 33, townsfolk buried him inside the church to stop grave robbers. His old house still stands, and Market Wayton still celebrates him each July at Giant Bradley Day. Number 13, Baby Bunny Smith. Helen Smith, better known under the stage name Baby Bunny, wasn't born into the spotlight, but she found her way to it early. By 13, her weight had reached a point that turned everyday life into a performance. She left school, joined a traveling sideshow, and was soon billed as a classic circus fat lady, eventually reaching 689 pounds. For years, she headlined acts at Coney Island, where spectacle thrived. But it wasn't just gawking crowds that gathered. It's where she met Peter Robinson, a 58-pound performer billed as the human skeleton. They shared not only a stage, but a life, raising 2 children together and later appearing side by side in the 1932 cult film Freaks. The contrast between them was no gimmick, it was real. Their relationship defied every cruel headline written about them. Helen died in 1951 at the age of 62 or 63, not as an act, not as a label, but as someone who had lived out loud on her terms. Number 12, the human toolbox. Few performers live their craft the way Brad Byers does. Raised in Idaho, he ran off with a circus right after high school, starting out as a juggler. Within 2 years, he had found his true obsession, sword swallowing. That obsession became a career spanning more than 20 countries, multiple Guinness records, and 2 appearances on America's Got Talent. One of those records still makes people cringe. 12 27-inch swords swallowed one by one, twisted 180 degrees in his throat, and withdrawn without a mark. He earned the nickname the Human Toolbox for good reason, hammering nails into his nose, threading hooks from nostril to mouth, even inserting spinning drills millimeters from his brain. In another act, his brother drove a quad over him as he lay on a bed of nails. Brad calls it performance. Most would call it madness. Decades later, he's still doing it. Proving mastery of pain can look like art when done right. Number 11. Tattooed Venus. Long before tattoos filled Instagram feeds, Betty Broadbent was already redefining beauty with ink. Raised in Florida and later Philadelphia, she met a tattooed man named Jack Red Cloud as a teenager, who introduced her to master artist Charlie Wagner. By 1927, she'd endured 6 long sessions that covered her body with over 565 designs: a Madonna and Child, Lindbergh, Pancho Villa, and a great eagle spanning both shoulders. That same year, she joined Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, later performing worldwide as the Tattooed Venus. Beyond display, she rode steers, trained horses, and learned tattooing herself, working in Montreal, San Francisco, and New Zealand. At the 1939 New York World's Fair, she entered a beauty contest just to make a point. Art on skin could be elegance, not rebellion. After 4 decades on the road, she retired in 1967 and died peacefully in 1983. 2 years earlier, she'd become the first inductee into the Tattoo Hall of Fame. Timeless ink, timeless woman. Number 10. The Kentucky Giant Fat Boy. A wise man once said, "The bigger the body, the heavier the burden." For John Hanson Craig, that wasn't a metaphor. At 2 years old, he weighed 206 pounds, enough to win Barnum's Bonnie Baby contest. As an adult, he reached over 900. The world called him the Kentucky Giant Fat Boy. But John was never just a headline. He produced his own shows, married twice, and raised a child. His first wife, Mary Jane, weighed nearly 800 pounds. After her death, he married Zella Ayres, a snake charmer with fire behind her smile. Together, they toured and built a life. Sure, Craig was a sideshow act, but behind the curtain was a man who made people laugh, built a home, and kept pushing forward even as his body pushed back. He died at 39, survived by the myth of his size, but remembered by those who saw the person underneath it. His life was full, heavy, and heartbreakingly human, but the people didn't want to understand. Number 9. The Venus of South America. Tono Maria's story was twisted long before it reached the stage. Originally from the Amore people of Minas Gerais, she appeared in London freak shows in the early 1800s, billed as the Venus of South America. Her body, decorated with lip and earplugs, as well as nearly 100 ritual scars, was marketed to Victorian audiences as a scandal in human form. Promoters claimed each scar marked a sexual transgression. Publications described her as having seduced tribal chiefs in succession, framing her as both exotic and dangerous. In truth, she was paraded for the gaze of an empire that saw her as both a warning and a fascination. Writers and scholars would later use her to dissect how femininity, race, and sexuality were twisted for entertainment. No one knows when or where she died. Her real voice was never heard. But even as a distorted image, Maria left behind a cultural ghost, one that still lingers. Number 8. Carl Norwood. Some performers had top billing. Carl had nicknames, Frog Boy among the harshest. A rare condition shortened his limbs and distorted his frame, but not his will. He started in sideshows as a teen, often paired with Dick Hilburn, the Quarterman. Together, they turned the crowd's stares into something that resembled survival. When Hilburn died, Carl kept going. He toured under Hilburn's widow, then with Ward Hall's show, performing until the tents started coming down. Carl didn't do stunts. He just stood there and somehow made people feel something. That's not easy. Sideshow life was hard. The pay was worse, but Carl kept showing up. Always. He died at 37 in Atlanta. No headlines, no big send-off, but to those who saw him, he mattered. He was one of thousands who turned a cruel world into a stage and kept going anyway. You won't find his name in books, but he was never just background. All right, guys, now let's move to number 7, the wonderful albinos. The Lucases were everything Barnum wanted: unusual, photogenic, and marketable. Rudolph, born in Madagascar to French parents, and his wife Auntie Anna from Venice, shared not just albinism, but a flair for presentation. Their son Joseph, born in Germany in 1850, became part of the act, and together they joined Barnum's American Museum in 1858. Audiences saw them as the wonderful albino family, or more sensationally, the Eliophobus family, a term made up to mean sun-fearing. They were sketched by Currier and Ives, photographed by Matthew Brady, and even featured on collectible cabinet cards. Joseph learned the violin and became a key part of their draw. Though Barnum paid them well by sideshow standards, he called them difficult and even threatened their manager when tensions rose. Rumors swirled about a daughter performing with them, maybe real, maybe added for spectacle. When Barnum's museum burned in 1865, the family vanished from his lineup, but not from history's archive of curiosities. Number 6, Joan Wisnant. Most people never think twice about their hands. Joan Wisnant never had that luxury because she was born without any. What she did have was defiance and 2 remarkable feet. While others saw loss, she turned it into talent. As a child, her toes mastered what fingers usually handle. She could cook, sew, brush hair, even strum a guitar. Her parents refused to hand her over to the freak circuit, but Joan didn't hide. She played Ripley's stages and state fairs with her feet cradling a guitar like any seasoned musician. A boy once laughed. She just smiled and played louder. She wasn't an object of pity. She left audiences stunned. Her music wasn't just skill, it was a statement. This is what grace looks like. Joan died in 1998, leaving behind no excuses, no resentment, and nothing ordinary. She didn't overcome her condition, she transformed it. And long after her songs stopped, people still remember how she played. Number 5, the man with 2 faces. Sam Alexander wasn't born different. He wanted to act. Then, in his 20s, he suffered a horrific accident. Most say he lit a match near gasoline, and it destroyed the lower half of his face. Reconstructive surgery would have taken 15 years. Sam couldn't wait. He disappeared for a while, struggling to accept what stared back at him. Then came a lifelike facial mask, custom designed by a young surgeon. With it, Sam re-entered the world, not as an actor, but a performer with a story. He toured with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, and Clyde Beatty Circus. His act? Simple. He'd share his story, then remove the mask. That was the finale. Later, he formed his own sideshow troupe. Even after more surgeries, he chose to keep the mask. Sam died of natural causes in 1997, but no one remembers the scars. They remember how he made them feel, heard, seen, moved. And in a business built on spectacle, that's completely rare. Number 4. The legless acrobat. Eli Bowen came into the world with a body built for spectacle. No legs, just feet fused to his hips. But that never stopped him. Raised in Ohio, he walked on his hands with wooden blocks strapped to them and built the strength to flip, somersault, and eventually become one of the most famous acrobats of his time. He joined Major Brown's Coliseum as a teen, but it wasn't until after his father's death in 1865 that he fully leaned into the showman life. Bowen spent decades with the biggest names in circus, from Cooper and Bailey to Barnum and Bailey, performing stunts atop a 13-foot pole. His act with armless wonder Charles Tripp, tandem bike and all, was a hit. Off-stage, Bowen married Martha Haight and raised 4 sons, one of whom reportedly became a judge. He was billed as the handsomest man in showbiz, and honestly, it stuck. At 79, still working at Coney Island, he died of pneumonia. Still a showman to the end. Number 3, Stella the Bearded Lady. Betty McGregor was born in 1902 in Battle Creek, Michigan, and spent her early life hiding a face that wouldn't stay smooth. She shaved up to 6 times a day trying to escape the beard that kept growing back. By her 30s, she gave up the battle and stepped into the spotlight as Stella the Bearded Lady. She toured with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, and later with Ward Hall's shows during World War II. Betty hadn't grown up in show business. She'd worked as a teacher and nurse, but years of hiding wore her down. On stage, she leaned into the image, turning self-consciousness into charisma. She didn't ask for sympathy, just attention. As the sideshow era dwindled in the 70s, Betty quietly retired, living as a man and working as an accountant. She died in 1977, not with headlines, but as one of the last bearded women who chose visibility over shame and left the stage on her own terms. What do you think about her? Number 2. The Three-Legged Man. George Lippert claimed his extra leg worked perfectly until an accident fractured it. Whether or not that part was true, the rest of him was already hard to believe. Born in Bavaria around 1844, Lippert had 3 legs and, as discovered during his autopsy, 2 hearts. He spent nearly 5 decades as a professional curiosity, including many years under Barnum. Long before medical marvels could be scanned or verified, Lippert's anatomy was the kind of oddity that brought crowds. In the late 1890s, competition arrived in the form of Frank Lentini, a younger, flashier 3-legged performer touring with Ringling Brothers. Lippert's fame faded fast. By 1899, he was broke. A florist named Mary Riggs took him in, and he lived out his last years quietly. He died in 1906 of tuberculosis. Even in death, he didn't leave quietly. His preserved body continued to appear in oddities collections. If curiosity is currency, Lippert cashed in until the very end. Number 1, Sarah Bartman. Sarah Bartman was born around 1789 to a Kuko family in South Africa's Eastern Cape. Orphaned young, she grew up on colonial farms and later worked in Cape Town. At 21, she was persuaded, or possibly coerced, into traveling to London, where she was exhibited under the name Hottentot Venus for her steatopygic figure. The shows drew crowds, curiosity, and criticism. British abolitionists took her case to court, but she testified, possibly under pressure, that she'd come willingly. She later toured Ireland and eventually France, where conditions worsened. Bartman was paraded at salons and dissected posthumously by Georges Cuvier, who used her body to fuel racist pseudoscience. Her remains were displayed in a Paris museum until 1974 and only returned to South Africa in 2002 after a lengthy political battle. Today, she's remembered not just as a victim of colonial exploitation, but as a symbol of resilience, her grave in Hankey overlooking the valley she once called home. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you very soon.